Hello and welcome to the MA's review of the week. I'm the Morning Advertiser Ed Bedington, and with me today I have the wonderful Karen Bosher. Good morning, Karen. How are you?
Good morning. A pleasure to be with you.
So, Karen, I mean, how are things? How are you finding things at the moment?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the sector's sort of falling into two separate parts at the moment. I think we've got some really great news, and certainly this week there were lots of positive reports of good things happening. Equally, the sector remains incredibly challenging, and I think we're seeing that separation come out. But for me personally, yeah, it's been a really great week, sun shining, and I always enjoy those moments.
Fantastic. So, I mean, we're here. We'll be talking on some of that market in a moment. But the big story this week has been Alan Milburn's youth unemployment report. I mean, what's your take on that? Because I mean, as a sector, we're huge. Or we used to be huge at youth employment, but it's been given a bit of a kick in the teeth, hasn't it?
Well, it's absolutely dreadful, and I think it is without doubt the biggest underpinning concern in society right now, because if we can't get youth employment moving, then there's just so many repercussions for society, for an ageing population, all of those things. And it staggers me really that we're in this situation. But, there's more than 1 million people, young people, between 16 and 24 now not in education, employment and training. And that's the highest level for over a decade. So we need to do something about it. That's essentially 1 in 8 young people. And I work with UK, who have an initiative called WHO, Hospitalities and Universities United, and their statistics show that 27% of young people who do a sort of a catering or hospitality course actually end up in the industry. So there's a massive gap, and what WHO is seeking to do is bridge that gap to make sure that if you go to college and you study specifically to come into hospitality and catering, that you do actually end up in the industry. And I think we should be asking ourselves really big questions as to why nearly 75% of young people who arrive with the intent of working in our industry really positively then either get disillusioned, or for whatever reason, maybe it's pay, maybe it's conditions, maybe it's aspiration and opportunity, or maybe it's just being able to get in, sort of fall away and end up not working in an industry that they've invested through their degree courses in coming into. I mean, it's unbelievable, really. So, the economic cost of youth unemployment is over £125 billion a year. So don't tell me that there isn't something imaginative that we can do. But from my experience, and particularly when it comes to pubs, we've got to be better and behave with intent if we want this to happen. And we've got to show that pubs are not just entry-level jobs. I think the danger is for us that we talk about, bartenders and pot washers and, accessible opportunities, which has led to a lot of young people coming in and then having these really amazing careers. But there's lots of, young people out there in universities that are studying marketing and HR, getting their CIPDs and doing their finance degrees, and they need to see the brilliant aspirational careers they can have if they join our industry, not just the frontline jobs. There's a much bigger sort of infrastructure of careers, and they can come along and have a brilliant time.
So moving really from that almost accidental careers, which is, I mean, if we're honest about them, there's a lot of people in this sector who've risen to the very greatest heights without that intention. Isn't there? They've started out and they've loved it and they've climbed up the ladder. But you're right, absolutely. Those professional sort of roles and things we need to be a little bit better at promoting.
Well, the tragedy is, that hospitality has traditionally been, Britain's first employer. And, my generation had Saturday jobs and holiday jobs and part-time pub work, and we all kind of came in that way. And that's where we learned confidence, teamwork, customer service, responsibility. And young people are not getting those opportunities because those first jobs where they're starting to develop social behaviour and learn how to be part of a team and in a workplace. Or, I assisted both my kids, neither of whom have ended up in hospitality, worked in hospitality to develop those skills. And my daughter is a vet surgeon, but she says to me, thank God I worked in hospitality, because dealing with the public front line is the best thing I ever did as a vet. And I'm like, wow, if we can bring those stories forward, and we've got the infrastructure, but also we're now talking about support all the time, which really pains me. I don't like talking about support, and I don't like sort of the negative flow of conversation, but it is a reality that the headroom that would have existed to onboard a couple of, weekend workers in a pub, that gap in terms of, productivity now doesn't exist, because the reality is it's running so tight.
Yes,
so that's an opportunity and longevity of career that's lost. We've got to think about imaginative ways that we can try and get that back. I think it's really important to our lifeblood.
Absolutely. And you mentioned negativity there, but the reality is the market is growing. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, this is the irony, isn't it? We are working in a consumer environment where there is market growth. Again, I think you were reporting actually that the UK pub and bar market is forecasted to reach £24.6 billion this year, yet outlet numbers continue to fall. So what that's indicating is that, we've got great growth on value, so where we're pushing price, and we've got that sort of premiumization, for the want of a better word. And premiumization isn't necessarily top end of the market, it just means that you can improve value for money to customers. Then pubs are able, through investment or through regenerating premises, to get growth. But I think what we're seeing is a market shift where the gap between the best and the worst, and those that are able and those that are not able, is just widening. And that's why we're piece that's just disappearing for us. My thing is going to go off. Sorry.
Don't worry, it's fine.
That's my vitamin reminder. There you go. It shows my age, doesn't it? Are you leaving that in?
I'm leaving that in. It's funny. We leave the funny bits in.
All right, okay. Leave that in. That's why my skin is. This is no filter. Right. That is my life. So the story is that people have stopped going to pubs, and yes, there is a habit change, but I keep hearing young people don't drink anymore. And that's why pubs are proven to be a problem. There is evidence that they are drinking more moderately and on different occasionality, but they still drink. So I think, that this whole piece about growth and where does growth come from, I think sometimes we smoke our own sort of, dare I say dope on this, but, do we smoke our own dope on some of these themes? And sometimes we've got to separate ourselves away from the generic conversation, show a bit of imagination. And I think people who are in their businesses showing a bit more imagination, a bit more gumption, a bit more appetite for competition, less allegiance, are emerging faster and better, and they're coming out the trap now, because we've seen Heineken say they're going to put £44.5 million into their pubs as investment, which is really heartening. And I had the privilege of meeting with a couple of the Star team, and they've got a really good plan, and I think they're responding well to the market. They want to put investment in, and they're behaving with real intent and clarity, probably around their estate in a way that, for circumstances, sort of pushing that through. But they've got the resources to do it. If you're talking about an SME that is very compromised on working capital, they now can't reinvest in their premises. And the reality is that, the birds are circling in terms of watching those businesses, and they will pick off the best. And then what you've got is a very homogenized, diluted sector that's always really relied on the spirit of the entrepreneur to really drive innovation, drive new things, disappearing very fast because they can't get back in on reinvestment. And the big guys, or the invested guys, or the PE-backed guys, then scooping up large parts of the good estate that exist, and there go with more formatted pubs. And I'm not sure, that that's really a good news story for the sector, that we're losing some of that intellectual collateral that drives change, difference, and has kept pubs going for hundreds of years. I think that's true. It's not driven by the really big, sexy end, but it is driven by the spirited end, the people who can see something that others can't. So it's why I'm not a massive fan of the franchise model. I absolutely see why big pub companies are reaching for it, because it's a really effective way to do things right now. But in the long run, do we really lose something out of the economy that makes, you know, pubs different from any other part of the hospitality infrastructure in the UK? I think that, you know, I don't want to be overly dramatic about it, but I do sort of sit there and contemplate, what are we losing that we may never see again.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Let's try and end on a positive note then. Sun's shining, the weather's great. What do you think? Is it too hot?
Well, I was actually contemplating the fact that my move to Portugal now is not a possibility, because I couldn't possibly live in such a hot climate anymore, because I'm absolutely failing here at the last couple of days. But it's great news for the sector, right? And where you've got a garden, I'm sure those owners and managed pub companies are rubbing their hands in glee that their quarterly reports are going to look much more favourable. And obviously we've got the World Cup coming, and that's the perfect storm if we can hold on to good weather and a World Cup, because what we're witnessing is that volume uptick, and that's really what everybody's waiting for. You can keep chopping your way through efficiency and price, and it's hard yards, and I'm sure that people who are working in the sector full time and having to live this every day are just fatigued and exhausted by the challenge. Let's not underestimate it. But for God's sake, please, let's have some good news this summer with a bit of good weather and a bit of good football. And hopefully a bit of I'm Welsh, but even I pray for an England and a good England. So if we could get that perfect storm, I think it would just take a ton of pressure off a lot of CEOs this year and subsequent teams and owners, founders. So I'm in the cross that continues for them in a big way.
Fantastic, brilliant. Karen, we are out of time, but thank you very much for that.
Brilliant, thank you.
Well, there you go. Never thought I'd hear the day a Welsh person is calling for an England success in football. But there we go. We will be back next week with more thoughts on.
Oh, for God's sake.
Put your vitamins away. We will be back next week. Until then, keep pouring those pints.